Continuation. Questions without notice. Senator Wong.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. Can the Minister tell the Senate who was the Social Services Minister in 2016 when the robo-debt scheme was first introduced?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, Mr President, I don't have the precise dates of various ministerial arrangements committed to memory. However, I am willing to assume, particularly given I assume this is meant to be a clever setup of the next question, that Mr Morrison would have been the minister at the time.
Senator Wong, a supplementary question.
And can the Minister advise who was the Treasurer that bragged that robo-debt was proof of the social welfare system being, quote, better managed, end quote?
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, once again, Mr President, unsurprisingly, I don't have the quotations of every single individual committed to memory, but I am again willing to assume, in terms of clever Labor Party tactics, that Senator Wong already knows the answer to that. That Senator Wong is assuming the answer is Mr Morrison. That Senator Wong is assuming that the answer to the question is Mr Morrison. In fact, she already knows that that is probably the answer to the question. Now, Senator Wong and everybody I would expect in this place would believe that debts ought to be recovered. Now, obviously, there have been issues in relation to this matter. The government has worked through those issues, including repayments in relation to it.
Senator Wong, a final supplementary question.
Can the Minister advise who was the Prime Minister in 2020 when $1.2 billion was used to settle the claims of victims of this government's illegal robo-debt scheme?
Senator Birmingham.
Well, Mr President, as I just said, repayments have been made in relation to this program. A process has gone through, repayments have been made. In no way should that take away from the fact that where claims are made and repayments ought to be recovered, then governments ought to find ways to undertake and recover those funds. That's an important principle that ought not be lost, notwithstanding the challenges in relation to this program and the fact that those repayments have had to be made.
Order. Senator Brockman.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Order.
Will the Minister
Senator Keneally.
Will the Minister provide a response to the Senate on the Twitter post issued today by the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs?
The Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Payne.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator Brockman for his question. Senators will have seen that the Prime Minister has this afternoon made a public statement in relation to this social media post by the Deputy Director-General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Beijing. Let me be clear that the Australian government has called in the Chinese ambassador and sought an apology from the ambassador in relation to this tweet. It is an appalling, disgusting and outrageous piece of social media. It is a tweet which illustrates the absolute scourge of disinformation and misinformation in social media, and it cannot be justified on any basis. As well as the Secretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade conveying that message to the ambassador here, we will be conveying that message directly in Beijing through our ambassador. We have also asked Twitter to remove the tweet as an example of disinformation. I echo the Prime Minister's expression of pride in all Australians who serve in uniform and who have served in uniform. They do not deserve to be treated in this manner. It is the most egregious example of this sort of harmful conduct that I have seen in my time in the parliament, in my time in a ministerial portfolio, and in fact in anybody's viewing of social media in any context, Mr President. We have very clearly rejected the premise upon which the tweet or disinformation in this tweet is based. This government has invited the review of the Inspector General of the ADF. We are dealing with these issues openly, transparently and in a way in which you would expect in a liberal democracy like Australia.
Senator Brockman, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President, and thank you, Minister, for that answer. Will the minister explain why this tweet constitutes disinformation?
Senator Payne.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank Senator Brockman. The Australian government does not resile at all from our responsibilities and our obligations regarding our involvement in Afghanistan. It is not that another country is commenting on our conduct in Afghanistan. Australia is a robust liberal democracy, more than capable of dealing with commentary of that nature. We are accountable for our actions, and that is why we called for and held the inquiry at the highest levels. We are taking unprecedented and difficult steps to hold those responsible to account, a small minority of Australian Defence Force personnel that are the subject of these serious, credible reports. Our response has been welcomed by the Government of Afghanistan, from the President to his ministry and others within the Afghan system. This image, however, is an absolute affront to common decency and to our entire Defence Force. It is grossly offensive and it should be removed.
Senator Brockman, a final supplementary question.
Thank you. Will the minister update the Senate on how Australia is working with international partners to combat disinformation?
Senator Payne.
Thank you very much, Mr President. And the relationship amongst responsible international partners around the world to combat disinformation, particularly during the period of the COVID-19 pandemic, is a very important one. Just this week, we will be co-sponsoring an event at the United Nations in New York on misinformation, which partners such as Latvia. Latvia led a joint statement in June, which we signed with 131 other countries, which warned that COVID-19 had, and I quote, created conditions that enabled the spread of disinformation, fake news and doctored videos, and in this case I would say photographs, to foment violence, to divide communities. We committed in that statement to fighting the so-called infodemic. I can assure you, Mr President, and others in this chamber that Australia will resist and counter efforts of disinformation. We will do so through facts and transparency, underpinned by liberal democratic values that we will continue to promote at home and abroad.
Senator Wong.
I seek leave to make a short statement.
Leave granted.
I think the Senate, and in the circumstance, thought it would be useful to express support for the comments made by Senator Payne. Can I make clear on behalf of the opposition we condemn the action taken by the Chinese government in the strongest terms. It is gratuitous, it is inflammatory and it is deeply offensive. And we say this is not the action, this is not the behaviour of a responsible, mature international power. These tactics will be met with unified condemnation in the Australian community, and they will be judged harshly by the international community. The men and women of the Australian Defence Force serve with honour. They deserve our respect, the respect of our allies, friends and partners around the world. The allegations in the Brereton report have horrified Australia. What sets us apart is the dignified, transparent and accountable manner of our response, and that is what happens within the Australian democracy. I thank the Senate.
Senator Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Government Services, Senator Ruston. In 2015, then Social Services Minister Scott Morrison targeted vulnerable Australians through his illegal robo-debt scheme in an attempt to achieve $4.7 billion in savings to bolster the budget bottom line. Why?
The Minister representing the Minister for Government Services, Senator Ruston.
Well, thank you very much, and I thank Senator Gallagher for her question. Clearly, the decision of many governments previous to make sure that Australians who have received money from the taxpayer for which that they were not entitled, there is an expectation by the Australian public that the governments will seek to recover that debt. And one of the measures which was put in place by the previous government and subsequently was undertaken by the government of which I am now a member was to use a form of determination called income averaging, we subsequently know and acknowledge that that method by which we determined debts was deemed not to be valid.
Senator
and
Keneally,
we acknowledge that it was determined not to
Senator
be valid.
Keneally,
and I believe
Senator
that the Prime
O'Neill,
Minister has actually apologised to those people who
Senator
have been
O'Neill,
impacted by that form of debt collection. However, as soon as we became aware that that method of debt collection was not valid, we immediately ceased collecting funds by that means and put in place a very, very quick, responsive program by which we would pay back Australians who had received debt notices as a result of using income averaging as the means by which to determine that debt. So to stand before you today, I mean, we are not the only government to have used income averaging as a means to determine debt. And in fact, I mean, I can actually give you a number of quotes of people that still remain in this parliament that are members of your party who have made comments in relation to it. You know, it's an example. In fact, I might wait to give the examples for the next question so I've got more time.
Order. Before I call you, Senator Gallagher, I'm going to insist that when I call a senator to order, they at least count to 10 before they completely disobey the standing orders again. It's the first day of the last fortnight. It's going to be a very long one if people continue to behave like this, and it's going to make it hard for me to rule on points of order when I can't hear an answer. So I ask for a little bit of self-restraint on this first day. Senator Gallagher, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. The government was warned 76 times over a number of years by the AAT that its robo-debt notices were not legally enforceable. Why did Mr Morrison and the government ignore these warnings?
Order. Senator Ruston.
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much, Mr President, and thank you, Senator Gallagher. Well, first of all, the government does value the role that the AAT does in providing independent merits reviews for a wide range of administrative traditions, but noting in each case that they are unique and they return on the absolute facts of that case. And there have been decisions of the AAT that have upheld those decisions, and there have been decisions of the AAT that have not been upheld. And to suggest that every single case that goes before the AAT is the same as the last one fails to understand the process that exists at the AAT. So I would draw the attention to the senator who asked the question that, as I said in my answer to my previous question, as soon as this government became aware that using income averaging was not a valid means by which to collect a debt, they ceased that program and immediately commenced a program of repaying that money to people who had received.
I'll call Senator Gallagher when I can hear her. Senator Gallagher, a final supplementary question.
Mr President. Yes. As Social Services Minister, Treasurer and then Prime Minister, Mr Morrison has continued to persist with this illegal scheme. Why did he just ignore not only the warnings but the painful consequences for so many Australians?
Senator Gallagher. Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, I would put on the record that the Prime Minister has expressed his regret to those people that have been impacted by this particular activity, which we have acknowledged has been deemed as not being a valid means by which to collect debts. I mean, we don't shy away from the fact that it has been found that this is not a valid means by which to generate a debt. You know, there is no argument, and we have apologised for and shown regret for the consequences of doing that. But let us remind everybody in this chamber that this method of determining debts is not something that we came up with. In fact, it was under your watch, and I will quote the then Minister for Human Services back in your government, Tanya Plibersek, from the other place, who said, if people fail to come to an arrangement to settle their debts, the government has a responsibility to taxpayers to recover that money. We support Ms Plibersek's view on this 100%.
Order, Senator Ruston. Time has expired. Order on my left. Senator McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is for the Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business, Senator Cash. Can the minister outline for the Senate how the Morrison government's record economic support has kept Australians in jobs and connected to their employers helping to drive our comeback and build a stronger Australia after the COVID-19 pandemic?
Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business, Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank Senator McLaughlin for his question. Mr President, there is no doubt that the economy is still recovering from COVID-19, and as the Prime Minister has said, there is still a long road ahead. And in fact, when you look at some sectors, such as tourism and aviation, they are still facing significant challenges. But when you look at JobKeeper and the purpose of the JobKeeper payment, it has and continues to keep so many businesses in business and so many Australians in jobs. In fact, the RBA has said JobKeeper saved at least 700,000 jobs, and if it weren't for the JobKeeper payment, the unemployment rate in Australia would have been 5 percentage points higher. That's right, Mr President, 5 percentage points higher. With the recovery now underway, what we're now seeing, though, is that fewer businesses are actually in need of JobKeeper. That said, of course, JobKeeper continues to support the sectors of the economy that do need it the most. Mr President, following a retest of business eligibility for the second phase of JobKeeper, for the 2 JobKeeper fortnights in October, around 500,000 entities have had applications processed covering more than 1.5 million employees or eligible business participants. The preliminary data indicates that around 450,000 fewer businesses and around 2 million fewer employees qualified for JobKeeper in October as opposed to September. These preliminary October JobKeeper figures suggest an improvement on the 2020-2021 budget assumption of 2.2 million recipients for the December quarter, with around 700,000 fewer employees or eligible business participants covered by the payment in October due to their employer no longer needing the payment.
Senator Cash. Senator McLaughlin, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. In addition to the job-saving support of JobKeeper, how has the government's economic support measures assisted businesses with their cash flow, kept Australians in training and supported Australians with the cost of living?
Senator Cash.
Well, thank you, Mr President. Our #1 priority as a government is, of course, to protect the health of Australians, to protect their jobs and to protect their livelihoods. And we've put in place and delivered the policies that are supporting this. For example, in addition to the $70 billion JobKeeper payments to date, our Supporting Apprentices and Trainees wage subsidy has now delivered over $723 million to keep over 103,000 apprentices and trainees in training. And that's where we need them, Mr President. We need them on the job, in training, and that's what we are doing. We also, as you know, though, have the cash flow boost. That has delivered over $32 billion to more than 800,000 employing small and medium businesses, giving them that vital cash flow when they needed it most. And of course, the SME Guarantee Scheme has delivered now more than 21,000 underwritten loans to small and medium businesses. We are putting in place the policies to keep businesses in business and Australians in jobs.
Senator McLaughlin, a final supplementary question.
With encouraging signs that the virus has now been contained across Australia, how will the government's economic recovery plan support Australians back into jobs and businesses to invest and grow and deliver a new generation of economic success?
Senator Cash.
Well, Mr President, as you'd be aware, COVID-19, it's been an economic and health crisis unprecedented in the last century. In Australia, we took early and comprehensive measures, of course, to stabilise our economy in the face of lockdowns and the enormous health uncertainty that we were faced with earlier this year. The JobKeeper program, which is actually Australia's largest wage subsidy program, has been critical to keeping so many Australians in jobs and building the foundation of what is now our economic recovery. Encouragingly, with the economic recovery now underway, we are seeing fewer businesses in need of JobKeeper. Over the last 5 months, in October, with the labour force figures coming out, we've now seen around 650,000 jobs return to the labour market. And this includes almost 344,000 jobs for women and around 226,600 jobs for young Australians.
Senator Waters.
Thanks very much, President. My question is to the Leader of the Government in the Senate, representing the Prime Minister. A new raft of temperature records were broken over this weekend with an intense and prolonged heat wave in spring. The Bureau of Meteorology has previously advised that your 2030 targets have Australia on track for upwards of 4 degrees of warming. So even if you meet and beat your targets, Australia will experience heat waves growing in frequency and intensity every single year, destroying crops, killing more coral, shutting down workplaces and claiming lives. Will the government lift its 2030 target in order to meet what the science requires?
Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. I thank Senator Waters for her question. Initially, let me just make the observation, which is always important in terms of considering climate policy, that a single week's or a single weekend's or a single weather event shouldn't, of course, be conflated immediately as a matter of climate change, which is not dismissing at all the longer-term trends and issues that are reported and forecast by different agencies. In relation to emissions reduction in Australia, I think it is important to remember the relative success Australia has had in reducing our domestic emissions here in Australia when compared with other countries around the world. I hear Senator Watts' comments. Australia's emissions are down 16.6% since 2005. Down 16.6% since 2005. Across comparable countries, across OECD nations, they've fallen by around 9%. They've fallen by around 9%. So we are running at nearly twice the rate of reduction compared with comparable countries. Indeed, other countries, allies and friends like Canada and New Zealand, who are often cited by the Greens or others on these matters, have barely shifted the dial in relation to their emissions, whilst Australia has seen a reduction of some 16.6%. So Australia has delivered, is delivering and will continue to deliver when it comes to emissions reductions. Our country will beat our Kyoto-era targets by some 459 million tonnes in relation to abatement targets. That is a huge overachievement relative to the commitments we've made, and our ambition is well and truly not only to meet our Paris commitments, but to repeat our trajectory of meeting and beating as we did with Kyoto 1 and Kyoto 2.
Senator Waters, a supplementary question.
Thanks, President. Well, noting your reference to that 16.6% figure, the quarterly emissions report released today shows that when you take out land use, which no other country uses in their figures, Australia's pollution is still higher than 2005 levels. The government's very proud of its figures today, but a pandemic is not a climate plan. Given gas is the main driver of pollution and risks our precious groundwater and farmland, will you dump your failed gas-led recovery?
Senator Waters. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, gas plays a very important role in Australia's economy and in other economies in terms of enabling the transition from some fuels, such as coal, which the Greens used to come in here and routinely talk about, to other fuels. Gas, indeed, has been a very important driver, not only in transitioning our economy and enabling stability and reliability in an energy system more reliant on renewable energy that comes with less reliability and needs to have dispatchable energy that can be scaled up when necessary, and gas plays a key role in that. But gas has increasingly played a role in relation to our other major trading partners being able to shift their emissions intensity in their economies as well. Gas plays a role in relation to Japan's emissions profile, to Korea's emissions profile. All of these key trading partners see gas as a crucial part of their own transition.
Order, Senator Birmingham. Senator Waters, a final supplementary question.
Thanks, President. 8 out of every 10 major businesses in Australia have today said that your 2030 target is inadequate and needs to be lifted. These are your people. Will the government attend President-elect Biden's promised climate summit to be held within 100 days of his swearing-in and lift Australia's ambition, or will you push those businesses to instead invest outside Australia?
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, we might wait for invitations before we decide what we're going to attend or not in relation to President-elect Biden. But we do very much welcome the fact that the President-elect has indicated a strong commitment to invest in technology that fuels and powers change in relation to climate change. The President-elect's commitment in relation to technology investment is consistent with our own commitment of a $1.9 billion technology investment package in low-emissions technologies. We see enormous complementarities between what President-elect Biden and our government are seeking to pursue in relation to how you achieve transformation in emissions, how you get improved outcomes in that regard. These are the crucial things that we will work and cooperate with the Biden administration on, and indeed we look forward to that engagement, particularly the complementarity with our largest investment partner and the ability in pursuing those technologies to cooperate at a private level as well as a government.
Senator Kitching.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. There are nearly 1 million Australians unemployed, 1.4 million underemployed and 2.8 million relying on government support, and unemployment is on the rise. How many of the 25,000 Australians who recently joined the unemployment queues were forced there because of the Morrison government's withdrawal of support?
Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, Mr President, our government through this crisis period of the pandemic has sought to respond not only to the health crisis and to achieve what are global leading results in terms of protecting Australians from the health risks of COVID-19, but we have also responded in unprecedented ways in terms of support for the Australian economy. And just as the health results are amongst the best in the world in terms of the resilience that Australia has shown, so too are our economic results amongst the best in the world. That is not to say that there aren't Australians doing it very tough. There clearly are. And today we note the announcement by Qantas in relation to job losses that will be sustained at Qantas and changes that company is making to try to ensure its resilience into the future. Now, I hear the interjections from those opposite, Mr President, who seem to pretend that in a world where global aviation has been battered to its core, there is some easy solution in relation to these matters. There's not, Mr President. You can't live in the fantasy world of those opposite. The reality is that we have put in place, through the JobKeeper mechanism, the single largest intervention in the Australian economy by a government in our peacetime history ever. And in doing so, we have helped to sustain and save many thousands of jobs. We've helped to sustain and save many thousands of businesses. But we said at the outset it was never going to be possible to save every single business or every single job, given the nature of the crisis that we face. But we are continuing to invest, having created JobKeeper, extended JobKeeper, and of course now pursuing through our budget a range of policy measures designed to drive jobs growth in the economy, to help with the recovery and to get people back to work as quickly as possible.
The answer has expired. Senator Kitching, a supplementary question.
Thank you. Last week, the Deputy Governor of the RBA warned the government to, and I quote, "Be careful of removing the stimulus too early." What is the economic impact of the Morrison government's decision to withdraw JobSeeker and JobKeeper in March?
Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, we outlined at the beginning of the pandemic and our economic response that what we sought to apply were measures that were temporary, were targeted and were proportionate. There have been the principles that have guided the government's response through this crisis, with some $507 billion in financial support for the Australian economy, representing some 25.6% of GDP. That record level of support has provided a lifeline to so many individuals. But in terms of the temporary, targeted, proportionate nature, we have also been taking careful steps and decisions in relation to JobKeeper. Those careful steps and decisions have seen, and JobKeeper, those careful steps and decisions have seen JobKeeper go through a number of steps and iterations that do see eligibility—
Order. Senator Wong on a point of order.
In the 8 seconds the minister has left, I wonder if he could be directly relevant to the question, which was the economic impact of a decision to withdraw JobKeeper and JobSeeker in March. We've had a lot of process, a lot of rhetoric, but there was a question which Australians are deeply interested in.
That question, Senator Wong, I've allowed you to remind the minister of the question, which followed a quotation regarding stimulus broadly from the Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank. My notes reflect. I'm listening carefully to the minister, but in my view, if he is talking about that policy, you can debate the answer after question time, but he is being directly relevant to the question because of the use of that quotation. Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, as we've said at every step of this crisis, we will continue to monitor the impacts at each step of the decision-making, and we will make decisions accordingly. That's why we created JobKeeper. It's why we extended it.
Time for the answers expired. Senator Kitching, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. In addition to the Reserve Bank, the OECD has also warned the Morrison government to avoid withdrawing vital support from the economy too early. How many Australians will lose their jobs as a result of the Morrison government ignoring these warnings?
Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, we have seen in the last 5 months some 650,000 jobs across the Australian economy recreated. This has been a result of the type of measures that our government's put in place to give the economic stability and lifeline that Australia needed. The senator referenced the OECD and their different analysis in her question. Well, Mr President, if you want to look at the global comparisons, you see that economic growth in Australia did indeed in the June quarter contract by 7%. However, if you look across comparable nations, we saw that in Germany it contracted by closer to 10%, in Canada by closer to 11.5%, by the US by more than 9%, and by the UK by more than 20%. And I hear Senator Gallagher say, well, that's comforting for the Australians who've lost their jobs. As I said in the primary question, we acknowledge this is difficult for many people, but this is a global pandemic we are responding to, and our government is applying unprecedented support to get Australians through it.
Senator Hanson.
Thank you very much, Mr President. My question is for Minister for Finance, Trade, Tourism and Investment, Minister Birmingham. Australia has no market other than China for 30% of Australia's exports and no alternative source for 20% of Australia's imports. We have put too many eggs in the China basket, with 40% of all export dollars earned in China, and now we are subject to import bans on a range of Australian commodities, including Australian coal, barley, wine and lobsters. These restrictions are designed to hurt our economy until we make change to a raft of policies, according to documents leaked by the Chinese embassy in Canberra to news outlets. Australian businesses are suffering. When will the government admit its mistake and change course?
The Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. I thank Senator Hanson for her question. These are very difficult times for many Australian businesses who have trade relations with China, and the Australian government has expressed deep concern at the fact that China, through a series of actions, particularly through the course of this year, but some of them dating back over a couple of years, has taken adverse action against Australia and Australian exporters. We absolutely oppose the actions that China has taken. We have sought very clearly to engage China, both in terms of the detail of the actions they've taken, but also to urge them to the table. As indeed the Prime Minister, Senator Payne, and with bipartisan support Senator Wong have indicated today, we are also grievously offended by the actions of the Chinese Foreign Ministry in relation to the image and words they have posted on Twitter today. But our government has not just fostered open trading relations with China. We have equally fostered them through a range of agreements struck with Japan, with the Republic of Korea, with Canada, with Mexico, with Peru, with Vietnam, with Indonesia. We have opened the door for trading relations for Australian businesses right around the world, and we pursue similar trade agreements with the European Union, the United Kingdom, and deeper trade relations with India and a range of other countries and markets. Ours is a market economy in which Australian businesses and companies make decisions about with whom they trade and where they sell their goods to and from whom they buy what they choose to do. And under those agreements and under the terms of our economy, we encourage businesses to get out there, because what it's achieved is 33 consecutive months where Australia has exported more than we've imported as a nation. That's good news for Australia. It's been good news for businesses,
time for the
and we want
answer
that
has
to continue.
expired. Senator Hanson, a supplementary question.
Thank you. This morning, Minister, you refused to acknowledge that China was engaged in economic coercion against the people of Australia. Was this because you are afraid to stand up and tell the people of Australia the truth, or are you afraid of standing up to China?
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, I think you have heard in this chamber today, from the words indeed of Senator Payne, Senator Wong, myself, the Prime Minister earlier today, most importantly, that the government is well and truly happy to stand up to China in those terms, and I have for a long period of time been expressing our concerns, firstly about the individual actions that China has been taking, and more recently about the cumulative effect of those actions. But it is important to note, Mr President, the statistic, as I said before, that month after month after month, Australian exporters and Australian businesses have been getting out to the world and selling more to the world and exporting more to the world than we have been importing. And they've been doing that under the network of trade agreements that our government, and indeed previous governments, have negotiated. It is important, Mr President, that our businesses are able to continue to do that, because 1 in 5 Australian jobs depends on trade, and we want to help support those jobs to continue to grow in the future across a range of markets.
The answer's expired. Senator Hanson, a final supplementary question.
Thank you. China is boycotting our product, with 80 ships line off their shores with coal, full of coal. One Nation, many Australians believe that Chinese products should be boycotted over the Christmas period. Will the government lend their support to the boycott push, or keep letting Australia push Australia around?
Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, I think there are a range of implications that China faces from a number of its actions that it's been taking of late. The fact that China has created such a higher risk environment for businesses trading and working with them doesn't just reflect poorly on China in the eyes of Australians. It is a point being noted around the world, and indeed China's actions around the world, not just towards Australia but towards other nations in terms of trade sanctions and other sanctions, are being noted and reflecting poorly upon China. And that reflection will be seen in the eyes of both governments here and around the world, and no doubt, Senator Hanson, in the eyes of consumers who will make their choices about the products that they buy and the countries that they buy them from. Consumers, no doubt, will be mindful of the types of actions we've seen today in terms of those terrible, appalling, shocking images, and that, I'm sure, will reverberate in their minds as they make those purchasing decisions.
Senator O'Sullivan.
Thank you very much, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds. Can the minister update the Senate on how the government is building a more secure Australia and preserving our regionally superior Collins-class submarine capability?
The Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds.
Well, thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator O'Sullivan for the question and also for his support for our Defence Forces in Western Australia and for welcoming HMAS Arunta home. Thank you. Australia submarines remain one of the most important capabilities in our Defence Force. The Collins-class submarines are only halfway through their life, and they are now very, very capable. Capable of shaping, capable of deterring, and also capable of responding to Australia's complex and very rapidly changing strategic environment. To preserve our Collins-class submarine, the Morrison government is very carefully considering the management of our entire submarine fleet over the next 50 years. We are ensuring that the Collins-class continues to remain regionally superior and well-served and in service well into the 2030s. And we will continue to ensure that they exceed international benchmarks again for decades to come. This is achieved through planned upgrades and technological upgrades done both in Western Australia and South Australia, implemented during full-cycle, mid-cycle and intermediate-cycle docking. With Australian industry, we will grow our submarine capability ahead of the attack-class submarines transition in the 2030s and out into the 2040s. Good management of this fleet has not always been the case. Never forget when we came into government in 2013, we inherited low submarine availability and Navy often struggled to get a single boat operational out to sea. There was no plan to upgrade and extend the life of our Collins-class submarines. No decision had been made on the future submarine sustainment, and there was no naval shipbuilding and sustainment plan. But this government has turned the shipbuilding and sustainment industry into a truly national sovereign capability.
Senator O'Sullivan, a supplementary question.
Can the minister advise the Senate what shipbuilding benefits the coalition government has delivered to Western Australia since 2013?
Senator Reynolds.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr President. Under this government's plan, naval shipbuilding has gone from zero to booming in 7 years. We are committed to building 45 vessels at Henderson worth around $16 billion. Already, about $3 billion of contracts have been signed with WA shipbuilders. A $1.5 billion transformation of defence infrastructure at Henderson and at HMAS Stirling is well underway. And we are investing more than $300 million in new maritime tracking ranges off the coast of Perth. Hundreds, in fact thousands, of new multi-generational jobs are being created across these programs throughout the supply chain in Western Australia. And I can assure all West Australians that all shipbuilding and sustainment decisions will be made for the right reasons at the right time in the national interest, and all Australians would expect nothing less.
Senator O'Sullivan, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. I thank the minister for that update. Good news for Western Australia. Can the minister advise the Senate what shipbuilding benefits the coalition government has delivered to South Australia since 2013?
Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much again, Mr President. Under this government's plan, the Coalition's government commitment to shipbuilding in South Australia has once and for all ended Labor's valley of death. Our record investment is building 23 of the world's most advanced naval platforms at the new digital shipyards in Osborne. We have delivered the Hobart-class destroyers and have laid the foundations for continuous shipbuilding in Australia for many, many generations to come. This astonishing achievement in just 7 short years has created thousands of jobs, created new business opportunities in South Australia and has helped reinvigorate Australia's industrial landscape. These are jobs that our great-grandchildren and the workers in South Australia, their great-great-grandchildren, will still be working in these industries in South Australia. The people of South Australia can have confidence that they are at the forefront of this government's plan to ensure Australia has the maritime capabilities
time
we
for the
need.
answer has expired. Senator Keneally.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. Former Minister for Finance Matthias Cormann has been jetting across Europe in an RAAF plane to the tune of $4,300 an hour to interview for his next job. What does the minister say to the nearly 37,000 Australians stranded overseas who are watching a former minister of the Morrison government fly around at taxpayer expense while they remain stranded overseas and are likely to miss Christmas with their families?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, Mr President, let me firstly deal with returning Australians and then I'll return to the issue of Mr Cormann and the OECD. Mr President, in relation to returning Australians, it is well known that the prime constraint in relation to getting more people into Australia are the quarantine facilities and their availability within Australia. Our government thanks the states and territories for working with us in relation to increasing the numbers of quarantine places. We thank the fact that working with the states and territories we've been able to grow the number of returning Australians on a regular basis. And we welcome the fact that when Victoria is able to again increase or welcome returning Australians and house them in hotel quarantine, then we will be in a position to see a further growth from around 5,600 currently processed to around 5,700. This is about those opposite, Mr. President. Those opposite seem to somehow think
Senator Wong.
They seem to somehow think that hotel quarantine is an easy, safe thing, and that we can just pile more and more and more and more and more in, and then there's no consequence to it. And there's no consequence to it. Well, I think the people of Victoria have seen there's a consequence to it. The people of South Australia have seen there's a consequence to it. So there are absolutely real issues when it comes to how we safely return Australians to Australia. In no way do we wash our hands of it, Senator Wong. In no way do we wash our hands. We absolutely are working closely with the states and territories. We've put ADF troops on the line to work with them. We've grown the number of places. We're getting more Australians home. We are doing that as quickly as is possible while keeping Australia safe from COVID at the same time.
I'm going to Senator Keneally. Senator Keneally, please resume your seat for a moment. Senator Wong, on numerous occasions there I was calling senators to order. This will become a very miserable 2 weeks if people don't have some basic decency so that I may hear answers for inevitable points of order. You're quite right, Senator Wong. Senator Birmingham does have a very strong voice. I still had trouble hearing him. Senator Keneally, a supplementary question.
Mr. President, Mr. Morrison defended the $4,300 an hour on a private plane, saying, and I quote, "If Matthias was flying around on a commercial plane, he would have gotten COVID. The risk of that was extremely high." Can the minister explain to the nearly 37,000 stranded Australians why Mr. Morrison believes it's acceptable for them to fly commercially at hugely inflated prices and face the extremely high risk of contracting COVID-19, but it's not okay for a former member of his government?
Order. Senator Birmingham.
Mr. President, not only do those opposites seem to think that there's some magic solution to be able to increase the available of safe entry points into Australia, not only do they ignore the fact that there are charter flights and supported commercial arrangements that our government has put in place, but they also bring the most small-minded Little Australia attitude to our candidacy for the OECD. I mean, having come out and supported the candidacy initially, they now seem to want us to run a campaign in a half-baked way intended to somehow lose. Now, Australia having decided to field a candidate for this position, is intended to campaign in a way to win, Mr. President. That's what's important, to actually make sure that having put Australia out there to win, we get on and do so. And so, Mr. President, we are supporting this candidacy. We're doing so because it will help Australia in the long term to influence the results.
Senator Birmingham. Time for the answers expired. Senator Keneally, a final supplementary question.
Thank you. Last week, stranded Australians appearing before the Senate COVID-19 Select Committee referred to the Morrison government's decision to fly Matthias Cormann in an RAAF plane as, and I quote, "appalling and an old mates club." Are they wrong?
Senator Birmingham.
Mr. President, we have absolute sympathy for the plight of many Australians overseas, and it is why we have worked to increase those quarantine places, put in place more supported flights and indeed provide targeted assistance in a range of different ways. But in relation to support for candidacies, we think this is a thing that Australian governments consistently should provide. Indeed, if we look back, I can see that Gareth Evans was provided with some $250,000 of support in 1999 terms, $250,000 of support for his candidacy by the Howard government
Senator Birmingham,
to UNESCO.
Senator Birmingham, I've got Senator Keneally on a point of order. Senator Keneally, a point of order.
My point of order is relevance. In no time did I mention 1995 or Gareth Evans. There are 37,000 stranded Australians.
Senator
that number
Keneally,
has doubled,
please resume
and
your
he
seat. Resume your seat. quite frankly, if you want to keep showing this amount of disrespect to the chair on the first day of the last fortnight, it's going to be a very slow question time as I constantly interrupt questions and answers. I do ask, while it is a very vibrant chamber, for people to at least heed me and pay a little bit of respect to the chair when I'm calling people to order. Now, on the point of order, Senator Keneally, your question contained a number of pejorative phrases in terms of quoting people. When questions contain pejorative phrases, I'm listening carefully, but in comparison, for example, to the first question asked today, which was very specific, there was no latitude for the minister to stray. But when questions contain politically loaded phrases, I don't think it's out of order for a minister to be able to respond in kind. That said, this was a quotation, not an assertion on your behalf. I accept that. I'm listening carefully to the minister's answer. He has 15 seconds remaining to address the question.
Mr President, we absolutely are giving all the support we can to get returning Australians home safely, whilst not jeopardising the safety of people in Australia or our economy in terms of the number of places that are available to get people back safely
Senator
and
Birmingham,
securely.
time for the answer has expired. Senator Askew.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Families and Social Services, Senator Ruston. Can the minister update the Senate on how the Morrison government is ensuring survivors of institutional child sexual abuse are able to receive redress?
Minister for Families and Social Services, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and thank you very much, Senator Askew, for that very important question. And it is particularly timely since the government, myself together with the Assistant Minister Seselja, announced on Friday that we would be introducing legislation and regulatory reform to strip institutions who fail to accept their responsibility to join the redress scheme of their charitable status. This was a commitment that the Prime Minister made earlier this year to survivors, and it is one that we are absolutely determined that we will fulfil. So once the legislation and the regulations have gone through this place, no charitable or religious organisation or institution will be able to benefit from taxation concessions while victims of, and survivors of child sexual abuse continue to be denied the redress that they so rightly deserve. To date, 129 charities have been identified as being named in applications in the scheme who have not yet joined the scheme. Whilst I acknowledge that many of those organisations are currently in the process of onboarding, we already know that there was one charitable organisation that was named in the July statement this year who has absolutely refused to accept their responsibility for the abuse that was undertaken in their institution. The Prime Minister has been absolutely clear in his statement that anybody who is named in the Royal Commission or who has an application lodged against them must do everything in their power to join the redress scheme so that we are in a position to be able to provide the redress to survivors that they so justly deserve. And I'd like to take this opportunity to remind the 80 charitable institutions who currently are in the process of onboarding, who gave a commitment that they would onboard by the 31st of December 2020, that they have until the 31st of December, and if they do not join in that time, they will be named and shamed and full sanctions will be taken against them.
Senator Askew, a supplementary question.
Thank you. Minister, how do the changes assist the government in signing institutions up to the redress scheme?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Look, we know this is a particularly complex area, and I'm very pleased to be able to say that we've actually taken a two-pronged approach to ensure that we are able to get access to survivors and make sure that no survivor is left behind. Firstly, we'll be amending the Charities and Not-for-Profit Commission regulatory framework to require all charities to participate in the scheme if a claim has been made against them or is likely to be made against them. Should that charity fail to take reasonable steps, that will mean that they do not meet their requirements and will be subject to the full suite of existing compliance powers, which includes deregistration as a charity. This would mean that they will no longer be able to get access to the favourable taxation concessions like income tax, fringe benefits tax and direct recipient status. It, I hope, will make those charities think twice. And further, we will also be making sure that basic religious charities are put into the same bucket as other charities.
Senator Ruston, Senator Askew, a final supplementary question.
Thank you. How does this important change add to other measures the government has implemented to ensure institutions do not shirk their moral obligations?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much. Well, we already have been able to make 4,200 payments, but we understand that more needs to be done, and that's why we are putting these very strong sanctions in place. Because if just the thought of being named and shamed isn't enough, then hopefully the financial penalty that this will do will make sure that people understand their responsibility and that this government is absolutely serious. We have made it absolutely clear that we expect any institution that was named in the Royal Commission to join, and any institution that has been named in an application from a survivor. We want them to join the scheme, and we want to make sure that we have every power to compel them to do so. We've also made it very clear that any institution who fails to join the scheme, who is receiving government funding, will no longer be eligible to be able to receive that funding. And I may remain absolutely committed to name and shame every single institution that does not accept their responsibility to survivors of child sexual abuse and give them the redress they deserve.
Senator McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Government Services, Senator Ruston. Can the minister confirm the government received 14 official reports of robo-debt victims threatening self-harm on 7th January 2017, 13 July 2017, 1 August 2017, 8 August 2017, 28 August 2017, 30 August 2017, 6 October 2017, 23 October 2017, 26 October 2017, 6 November 2017, 7 August 2018, 24 September 2018, 6 November 2018 and 11 December 2018.
The Minister representing the Minister for Government Services, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator McCarthy for her question. Senator McCarthy, I do not have the information that you've required with me today. However, I will take the specific answers to the detailed question that you asked in relation to each and every one of those individual incidents of which you have just quoted. But I would also make the point that this is a very delicate and sensitive area, and that we need to be mindful that we handle any issue when it comes to actions and we need to, and I suppose I would warn everyone opposite that talking about this particular issue requires great sensitivity, and I'd caution anyone to be making unfounded conclusions to continue to perpetuate the upset and trauma that is inflicted on the loved ones.
Order. Senator McCarthy's on her feet. Senator McCarthy, a supplementary question.
Has the minister asked the department for a report on how many Australians died by suicide as a result of the government's illegal robo-debt scheme?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, as I said, we need to be very careful and very sensitive, and anybody who dies by suicide is a tragedy, and I want to say that up front. But, Senator McCarthy, I reject the premise of your question in saying that, because I believe it is absolutely incorrect for you to interpret Centrelink customer death statistics as suicides. These are all individual people, individual cases, and all deserve the respect to not just be spoken about as a statistic. We know, Senator McCarthy, that as of that there are a number of people who are deceased customers whose estates are entitled to a refund under the income compliance program. And those people will receive their refunds, as will everybody else in the income compliance
Senator
program.
Wong, on a point of order.
Well, Mr President, the question was asked with the sensitivity that this minister is urging. And what Senator McCarthy asked, and the point of order is direct relevance, is whether the minister had sought a report about those who might have died by suicide as a consequence of being pursued under the illegal scheme. So we haven't asked about refunds. We've asked whether or not there has been a report asked for around the effects of the scheme.
On the point of order, I've allowed you to restate the question there, Senator Wong. While the minister was talking about this sensitive matter in substance, I do consider her to be directly relevant. You've restated the question. She has 4 seconds remaining to answer, or have you concluded? Oh, Senator Ruston has concluded the answer. Senator McCarthy, a final supplementary question.
Minister, why did the government persist with the Prime Minister's robo-debt scheme when it knew it was illegal and there were reports of self-harm and suicide?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. And as I said to a previous question that was asked from me by those on the other side, that when we became aware that the income compliance program, which used income averaging as the sole determining factor for determining a debt, we ceased that program. We ceased that program and we commenced immediately putting in place a program to repay those debts. We have nearly completed that program and we are just working through the final stages to make sure that anybody who had debt was raised as a result of income averaging is now in the process of receiving that refund.
Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, I ask that further questions be placed on notice.